Elon Musk woke up before sunrise, long before the streets became noisy and crowded. The room was quiet, and for a moment he simply sat at the edge of his bed, trying to settle the thoughts racing in his mind. Stories had been reaching him for months, stories about how people with little money were treated at banks, how they were ignored, judged, or pushed aside. The more he heard, the more it bothered him. He had built rockets, electric cars, and companies that reached millions, but this problem felt personal in a different way. It was not about technology. It was about how people treated one another. He wanted answers, real answers, and he knew he would never get them by walking into a bank as himself, surrounded by cameras and attention. If he entered with a name everyone knew, everything would look perfect on the surface. The employees would smile, assist him, and pretend everything was fine. That wouldn't help him understand the truth. So he made a decision, one he hadn't shared with anyone, not even his closest staff. He was going to dress as someone who had nothing, someone who might normally be overlooked. Only then could he see how everyday people were treated. He stood up and walked to the bathroom mirror. His reflection looked the same as always, sharp, well-kept, familiar. That needed to change. On the counter, he had placed a small kit he put together the night before. Old, worn-out clothes he had bought quietly, without drawing attention. A faded jacket with patches, a hoodie that sagged with age, and shoes with scuffed soles. Nothing flashy, nothing clean. Just simple clothing that blended into the background. He washed his hands, took a breath, and began preparing. First, he messed up his hair, pushing it in random directions until it no longer held its usual style. Then he used a small container of stage makeup, just enough to make his skin look tired and a little dirty, but not exaggerated. He didn't want to turn it into a costume. He wanted to look real. As he worked, he found himself thinking about the people whose stories had pushed him toward this plan. A single father who couldn't open an account because he lacked certain documents. A woman who was talked down to by a teller for asking too many questions. A young man who was told to leave because the manager assumed he was there to cause trouble when he only wanted to deposit a small check. These stories had stuck with him. He knew he couldn't fix everything, but he wanted to understand. He wanted to see the treatment with his own eyes. When he finished getting ready, he took a step back from the mirror. The transformation surprised even him. He didn't look like the CEO everyone recognized. He looked like someone who hadn't slept well, someone who had been walking the streets for days. His clothes hung loosely, the sleeves worn, the fabric dull. It was uncomfortable, but he didn't mind. He wasn't doing this for comfort. He picked up a small bag from the table, a simple backpack that carried nothing more than a water bottle, a notebook, and a hidden micro camera sewn into the front strap. It wasn't there for drama. It was there so he could remember exactly what he experienced without relying only on memory. He slipped the bag over his shoulder and left his room quietly, moving through the hallway without alerting anyone. He knew if someone stopped him and asked where he was going, the plan might fall apart. People tended to worry when he went anywhere without security. But today wasn't about safety. It was about learning. Once he stepped outside, the cool morning air wrapped around him. The sky was still a deep blue, with only a hint of light peeking over the horizon. He walked toward the street, keeping his head down, trying to blend in. For the first time in years, people walked past him without a second glance. No one whispered. No one pointed. No one tried to take a picture. It felt strange, but in a way, freeing. He reached a bus stop and sat down on the cold metal bench. A few early commuters were scattered around, one reading from a small screen, another sipping coffee, a third staring blankly at the quiet street. No one noticed him. That was exactly what he wanted. The bus arrived with a soft hiss, its doors opening as warm air rushed out. Elon stepped inside and dropped a few coins into the fare box. He chose a seat near the back, looking out the window as the city slowly woke up. Buildings passed by in a blur, lights flickering on as stores prepared to open for the day. He felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. He had spent countless hours inside labs, factories, and boardrooms, but today felt different. Today, he was stepping into the world the way many people did every day quietly, without recognition, without privilege. As the bus moved closer to downtown, the streets grew busier. More people boarded, filling the aisle with the smell of fresh coffee, wet jackets, and morning chatter. A few passengers glanced at him, but their eyes slid away almost instantly, uninterested. It was exactly the reaction he expected. Appearance shaped judgment more than most admitted. When the bus finally reached his stop, he stepped off and looked around. The bank he had chosen stood across the street, tall and modern, its glass doors reflecting the morning sun. It looked welcoming from the outside, clean and professional. But he knew appearances could be misleading. That was the whole reason he was here. He crossed the street slowly, taking in every detail. The people walking past him wore neat clothes, carrying briefcases and tote bags. Some hurried with purpose, others strolled casually. No one stopped or spoke to him. A few looked confused when they saw his worn-out jacket, but their expressions faded quickly as they kept moving. Standing just a few feet from the entrance, he paused. This was the moment everything would begin. He felt an unexpected knot form in his stomach. It wasn't fear, exactly more like anticipation. The kind that comes when you know something important is about to happen. He reached for the door, but before he could pull it open, a security guard inside glanced over and narrowed his eyes. The guard stepped closer, watching him with a look that held more suspicion than welcome. Elon took a breath and pushed the door gently. He told himself to stay calm, stay quiet, and stay in character. Every second from this point forward mattered. Every reaction, every word, every gesture from the people inside would shape what he learned. He stepped into the cool, air-conditioned lobby. The scent of polished floors and paper filled the air. Bright lights hummed softly from the ceiling. Customers waited in lines, tapping their feet or scrolling through their phones. The security guard approached slowly, still watching him, as if unsure whether to speak or to stop him. Elon looked around, trying not to seem nervous. He was not here to cause trouble. He was here to understand. But he already felt the shift in how he was being perceived. He understood now more than ever how different the world could look, depending on what you wore, how you appeared, and what others assumed about you. The first interaction was seconds away, and he had no idea what was waiting for him next. The moment Elon stepped into the bank lobby, he felt the temperature drop, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the way people reacted to him. It was subtle, but real. A few customers glanced up, saw the worn-out clothes, and looked away just as quickly. The lobby was bright, clean, and polished, but the atmosphere around him felt strangely cold. He stayed quiet and moved slowly, trying to blend in with the small crowd. He didn't want to draw attention, but he also didn't want to hide. He simply wanted to experience what anyone in his situation might face. The security guard was the first to step toward him. The man had a serious expression, his eyes scanning Elon from head to toe, as if assessing whether he belonged here or not. He didn't say anything at first, just watched him with an expression that felt more like a warning than a greeting. Elon nodded politely, hoping the gesture would show he wasn't there to cause trouble. The guard gave a slow, cautious nod back, but his eyes stayed locked on him, almost as if waiting for a reason to intervene. Elon took a small breath and walked toward the line for customer service. The floor beneath him echoed lightly with each step, and he kept his pace steady, trying not to look nervous. A few people ahead of him shifted their weight, glancing at him out of the corners of their eyes. Someone else stepped slightly to the side, creating a small gap as if the space between them and him needed to stay just a bit wider. He didn't take it personally. He reminded himself that this was exactly why he was here. Judgment based on appearance was one of the stories he had heard over and over. The line moved slowly. A woman at the counter argued softly with the teller about a transfer that hadn't gone through. A man behind her tapped his foot impatiently. A pair of friends in the far corner chatted quietly while filling out forms. Elon kept his eyes forward, but he could still feel the tension around him. His clothes were doing their job. He didn't look wealthy. He didn't look important. He just looked like someone who needed help. After several minutes, the line moved, and Elon stepped closer to the counter. The teller working the station glanced up briefly, then quickly returned to typing. The look had lasted only a second, but Elon caught it. A mixture of annoyance, suspicion, and impatience. When it was finally his turn, the teller didn't greet him the way she had greeted the other customers. She didn't smile or offer a friendly tone. Instead, she spoke as if she had already decided the interaction would be a problem. "Yes?" she said, her voice flat. Elon stepped forward, keeping his posture calm. "Hi," he said softly. "I'm trying to ask about opening a basic account." The teller's fingers stopped typing. She didn't look pleased. "Do you have an appointment?" She asked, double quotes, "No, I didn't know I needed one." Elon replied. She sighed, the kind of sigh that made it clear she wasn't thrilled to deal with him. "You usually do. And you need identification, proof of address, and minimum deposit. Do you have all that?" Her tone wasn't informational. It was discouraging. Elon shook his head. "I have some ID, but I'm not sure if I have everything you're asking for." She gave him a long stare, the kind that made people shrink a little. "If you don't have the required documents, there's not much we can do. Maybe come back another day when you're more prepared." Elon kept his gaze gentle. "Would it be possible to check what I'm missing? I'm trying to understand the process." The teller leaned back, clearly annoyed. "Sir, we're busy. If you don't have what you need, I can't hold up the line." She glanced past him at the person behind him, as if to hurry him away. He felt a small sting in his chest. Not because he was offended, but because he imagined how many people had faced that same tone. How many had walked away feeling defeated. "I'll be quick," Elon said softly. "I just want to understand what documents I should bring next time." The teller exhaled sharply and turned her screen toward herself, clicking through a few windows. "Fine. For a basic account you need ... She listed the documents too quickly. Elon had trouble keeping up. He tried to mentally note the requirements, but she gave him no time to ask questions. When she finished, she didn't wait for him to respond. "That's it. Next." She looked past him again. Elon blinked, surprised at how abruptly the conversation ended. He waited a beat, unsure if she had misunderstood his intention. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "Could I ask one more thing?" The teller's shoulders tightened. She didn't hide her frustration. "Sir, please. You're holding up the line." Her voice was louder this time. A few customers turned to look. Elon lowered his head slightly, not wanting to cause a scene. "All right. Thank you for the information." He stepped away from the counter, giving space to the next person. As he moved aside, the security guard's eyes followed him again, sharper now. Elon noticed the guard whisper something into a small radio on his shoulder. He swallowed a breath. This was only the beginning. He walked toward the small seating area at the side of the lobby. A pair of chairs sat near a rack of brochures. He sat down quietly, pretending to look through the papers, while watching how the staff interacted with other customers. It took only a few minutes to see the difference. "Hey," well-dressed customer approached the same teller who had rushed him away. Her voice immediately changed. Warm, patient, helpful. She explained things slowly, even smiling. Elon watched carefully, absorbing every detail. He wasn't jealous or offended. He was observing exactly what he came here to see. This treatment, the subtle shifts in tone and attitude, told a story he could never have understood from a report or a conversation. He looked down at his worn jacket, then back at the teller. Same question, different tone, different kindness. Different level of respect. A soft ache formed in his chest. Not for himself, but for the people who live this reality every day. He leaned back in the chair, letting the scene unfold in front of him. Every expression, every change in voice, every look of impatience or warmth, he studied them closely. This visit was far from over, and he sensed that the next moments would reveal even more than he expected. Elon sat quietly in the corner of the lobby, pretending to read a brochure, but his mind was fully focused on everything happening around him. The small camera hidden in his backpack strap captured each detail, though he didn't rely on it alone. He was experiencing things firsthand, and that mattered more than any recording. A few minutes passed before something happened that caught his attention. A young employee walked past him with a stack of papers in hand. As soon as she noticed his worn jacket and tired appearance, she instinctively pressed the papers tighter against her chest and stepped a little farther away than necessary. It was subtle, but not subtle enough to miss. Moments later, a manager walked across the lobby. He didn't stop or say anything, but he glanced at Elon with the same quick, uncomfortable look someone might give a stranger walking into a private event uninvited. The glance lasted only a second, yet it carried an entire message. You don't belong here. Elon kept his head down. He didn't react. He didn't want to change the outcome or influence their behavior. His goal was simply to observe. After a while, a security guard approached again. His steps were slow but purposeful. Elon sensed the tension in the air before the guard even spoke. Everything all right here? The guard asked. The tone wasn't friendly. It was cautious, almost defensive. Yes, just waiting. Elon replied calmly. The guard looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. Then he nodded, but only halfway. Okay, just letting you know, if you're not being helped, you can't sit here too long. We tried to keep the seating clear for customers. Elon blinked. He was a customer. He was trying to ask about an account, but pointing that out would draw attention, and he didn't want to break the illusion. Understood? He said softly. The guard walked away, but the message lingered. He wasn't welcome to sit for more than a few minutes. He wasn't welcome to wait. He wasn't welcome, period. Elon shifted in his chair, wondering how many people came here with genuine questions, only to feel pushed out like this. People who didn't have fancy clothes or the confidence to insist on their needs. People who didn't have someone to speak up for them. He closed the brochure and stood up slowly. Maybe if he approached a different teller, he would get clearer answers. As he began walking toward another open station, he heard a voice beside him. Hey, someone whispered. Elon turned. A middle-aged man standing near the brochure rack gave him a sympathetic look. The man wore an old jacket too, though slightly neater than Elon's disguise. Don't take it personally, the man said quietly. They treat people like us differently. Happened to me last week. Elon swallowed. Really? The man nodded. Came in to ask about a simple issue with my card. The teller talked to me like I was bothering her. But when the guy behind me showed up in a suit, whole attitude changed. Elon absorbed the words carefully. Hearing it from someone actually living the experience made it even more powerful. Sorry you went through that, Elon said sincerely. The man shrugged. I'm used to it. Just wanted you to know you're not imagining it. The man walked away, leaving Elon with a heavier feeling than before. It was one thing to notice bias on his own. It was another to hear from someone who had dealt with it repeatedly. He slowly approached another teller. This one looked younger, maybe new to the job. She offered a polite smile to the customer ahead of him, but the moment she looked at Elon, her smile faded not completely, but enough for him to notice. "Yes?" She asked. Her tone wasn't harsh, but it wasn't warm either. "Somewhere in the middle. I'm trying to understand what I need to open a basic account," Elon said. She nodded. "Do you have ID?" "Yes." "Proof of address?" "I don't have it with me." She gave a small sigh of disappointment. Not rude, but impatient. "You'll need that. And a deposit. But you can check our website for full details." "Could you explain it to me?" Elon asked gently. Her eyes flicked to the line behind him. "I can, but I need to keep things moving. We're short-staffed today." She quickly recited the requirements, faster than before, almost rehearsed. Elon could tell she was trying to get through the interaction without spending too much time. When she finished, she waited for him to step aside. She didn't say anything else, didn't ask if he needed help, didn't offer brochures. "Thank you," he whispered. Stepping away, he walked back toward the seating area, but before he could sit, the security guard spoke again. "Sir," the guard said, in a firmer tone this time, "if you're done with your transactions, I'll need you to wait outside." Elon paused. "I'm still trying to understand the process." The guard crossed his arms. "You've been here a while. If you need more information, you can call customer service." People nearby turned their heads to watch. Elon lowered his gaze and nodded. "All right." He stepped toward the exit slowly. The heaviness in his chest grew with each step he took. He wasn't hurt by the guard's tone, not personally, but he imagined how this must feel for someone who wasn't doing this as an experiment. Someone who came here genuinely needing help. Someone who left feeling smaller than when they walked in as the doors opened and a rush of outside air greeted him. He glanced back one last time. The bank was busy, the staff moving quickly, customers chatting. Life inside went on as normal, but he had seen enough to know that normal didn't mean fair. He stepped onto the sidewalk, letting the cool air wash over him. The sun had risen higher now, lighting the street with a warm glow. He wasn't finished. Not yet. There was still more he wanted to understand, and something deep inside him whispered that the most revealing moment was still ahead. Elon stood outside the bank for a long moment, letting the sun warm his face as he gathered his thoughts. The morning had been high, opening in ways he expected and in ways he didn't. The cold stares, the quick judgments, the impatience, and the way every small request seemed to be treated like an inconvenience. It all settled heavily inside him. But he wasn't done. Not yet. He walked down the street slowly, blending into the flow of pedestrians. His disguise still held perfectly loose jacket, worn shoes, and a face that looked tired enough for people to avoid eye contact. He passed a small cafe and decided to sit on the bench nearby, thinking through what he had seen. He replayed the teller's tone in his mind, the manager's glance, the security guard's attitude. And the part that stuck with him most was the quiet voice of the man who had said, "They treat people like us differently." That sentence echoed inside him. After a few minutes, Elon pulled out his phone, hidden deep in his backpack so no one saw earlier, and sent a short message to his assistant. It was simple. "Bring the team. Meet me in front of the bank." He put the phone away immediately. He didn't want to break the illusion just yet. He wanted a few more minutes as the person everyone had assumed he was. He stood up and walked back toward the bank. Each step felt heavier, but also more purposeful. He knew what he had to do next. By the time he reached the entrance again, A black car had already pulled up near the curb. Another one stopped behind it. His assistant stepped out, followed by two security members, who usually stayed close during public outings. They looked around, searching for him, clearly confused. That's when Elon stepped forward. The assistant froze. "Sir?" she whispered, her eyes widening in shock. "Is that you?" Elon nodded once. The disguised clothes, messy hair, tired expression, it all made him nearly unrecognizable to his own team. The assistant covered her mouth in surprise. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I'm fine," he said calmly. "I just need you to follow my lead." She nodded, still stunned but trusting him. Elon walked straight to the bank entrance. The moment he crossed the glass doors, every head turned. The security guard who had told him to leave earlier stiffened, his eyes widening as he realized who had just re-entered the building. Elon's team walked in behind him. The atmosphere shifted in seconds, from casual routine to tense awareness. The manager hurried over, his steps quick and nervous. "Good morning, sir," he said with a suddenly warm voice. "We didn't know you were coming today." Elon removed the worn jacket and pulled back the hood, revealing his face clearly. "I know," he said simply. The teller who had dismissed him earlier now stared, speechless, her hands frozen above her keyboard. Another employee whispered to a coworker, their eyes darting between Elon and the security guard. Elon kept his tone calm, not angry, not loud, just steady. "I came earlier," he said. "My team wasn't with me. I asked simple questions. I didn't receive simple answers." The manager swallowed hard. "Sir, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." "If we had known," Elon gently raised his hand to stop him. "That's exactly the point," he said. "You didn't know. And that's why I came." The room fell silent. Customers paused mid-conversation. A few people pulled out their phones, unsure whether to record or simply observe. Elon continued, his voice firm but calm. "I wasn't here as myself. I was here as a regular person. Someone who doesn't walk in with a name people recognize. Someone who might need help but doesn't look like they belong in your eyes." The manager's face flushed. The security guard lowered his gaze. The teller shifted uncomfortably, her fingers trembling slightly as she brushed her hair behind her ear. "I experienced judgment at the door," Elon went on. "Pressure to leave the seating area, impatience when asking questions, and different tones depending on how people were dressed. This isn't about me. This is about how people are treated every day when they don't look the way you expect a good customer to look." The manager opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Elon's assistant stood behind him silently, watching the room with a calm but serious expression. Elon looked at the security guard. "Earlier, you asked me to leave when I was simply waiting. Is that the standard here?" The guard cleared his throat nervously. I thought you were done, sir." Elon nodded slightly. "Or did you think I didn't belong because of the way I looked?" The guard's eyes dropped again. He couldn't answer. Elon turned to the teller. "And you?" "I asked simple questions. You answered differently, depending on who you were talking to." She swallowed hard. I didn't realize. I know," Elon said softly. "Most people don't. Bias can be quiet, but people feel it." A few customers nodded subtly, as if agreeing but unsure whether they should say anything. Elon took a gentle breath and stepped back slightly so he could address the entire room. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," he said. "I'm here to understand. And now that I do, I want to make something clear. Kindness doesn't cost anything. Respect doesn't depend on clothing. And fairness should never depend on assumptions." The room stayed silent. Elon looked at the manager once more. "I'll be reviewing everything I witnessed today, and I'll be talking with your leadership. This isn't about punishment. It's about improvement. Real improvement. The manager nodded quickly. Of course, sir. We're committed to making things right. Elon stepped back from the counter. The tension in the air slowly eased, though the staff still looked shaken from the unexpected reveal. He turned toward the exit, walking calmly with his team following behind. As he reached the door, he glanced back one more time. This wasn't this. And this was the beginning of change. And he knew the ripple of what happened today would spread much farther than this. Lobby, the moment Elon stepped outside the bank. The noise of the street felt louder than before. Cars moved past, people talked as they walked, and the city carried on with its usual rhythm. Yet for him, everything felt strangely still. What had happened inside replayed in his mind, not as a dramatic moment, but as a quiet truth finally revealed. He stood on the sidewalk for a few seconds, letting the cool breeze settle over him. His assistant walked up beside him, still looking a little stunned. "Are you sure you're all right?" she asked softly. Elon nodded. "I'm fine. Just thinking." She didn't press further. She understood his tone well enough to know he needed space. His security team waited near the car, but he didn't move toward them yet. Instead, he walked a few steps down the street, blending into the crowd again. People brushed past him without realizing who he was. A few looked at him briefly, seeing only the worn clothes and tired eyes, but no one stopped or questioned him. He watched the sidewalk, watched the faces around him, watched how quickly people judged without knowing anything. He thought about the security guard who treated him like a problem. He thought about the teller who rushed him away. He thought about the manager who suddenly changed tone once he saw who had walked through the door. And most of all, he thought about the man who told him quietly, "They treat people like us differently." That sentence stayed with him like a weight he couldn't ignore. After a moment, he returned to the car. The assistant opened the door for him, and he slid into the back seat. The door closed softly, shutting out the noise of the street. "Let's go," he said. The car pulled forward. As the city blocks passed by his window, Elon stayed quiet. Not because he was upset, but because he was planning. His mind worked quickly, not with anger, but with purpose. He knew he couldn't change everything overnight. But he also knew that change didn't always start with big inventions or dramatic breakthroughs. Sometimes it started with something as simple as a moment of empathy. He remembered how it felt to be ignored. He remembered the look of frustration on the teller's face. He remembered the guard's suspicion. And he remembered how uncomfortable it felt to be treated like someone who didn't matter. That feeling alone was enough to push him into action. By the time he reached his office, his team was already preparing a meeting room. News had started spreading. Someone at the bank had posted online that Elon Musk had arrived in disguise. The post didn't show his face clearly, but it didn't matter. People started talking, questioning, wondering what had happened. But Elon didn't care about the online chatter. He cared about the real experience. He walked into the meeting room, where a small group of executives and advisors waited. They looked confused, unsure why they had been urgently called in. Elon stood at the head of the table, still in his worn disguise. It made the executives look even more surprised. "I spent the morning at a bank," he said. "Not as myself. As someone who just needed basic help." They listened carefully. "And what I saw confirmed what many people have been telling us," he continued. "Some places treat people differently based on how they look, not based on what they need." He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. "I want to create something," he said. "Something that helps people who feel ignored or judged when they walk through a bank door. A system that treats everyone with dignity. Clear information, simple steps, real guidance." One of the executives leaned forward. "Do you mean a new banking service?" "Maybe. Elon said. Or maybe something better. Something that makes financial help accessible to everyone. No complicated barriers. No assumptions based on appearance. The room fell quiet as they processed his words. This isn't just a business idea, Elon added softly. It's a responsibility. For the first time since the morning, he took off the worn jacket and placed it on the table. This, he said, looking at it, showed me more truth in a few hours than most reports show in years. No one said anything. They didn't need to. The meeting ended with a clear plan: research, design, and action. Real steps towards something that could make life easier for people who were often overlooked. Days later, when the story went public not through gossip or rumors, but through Elon's own announcement, the reaction was enormous. People shared their experiences, their struggles, their frustrations with being judged based on appearance. Banks released statements. Some promised to retrain employees. Some apologized. Some stayed silent. But the most important part wasn't the headlines. It was the conversations, the awareness, the shift. For many people, the story wasn't shocking. It was confirmation of what they had lived through for years. For others, it was the first time they realized how differently people could be treated. And for Elon, it was a reminder that real change didn't always require a rocket or a new invention. Sometimes it required walking into a place as someone invisible and understanding how that felt. As weeks passed, the project he started began taking shape. A platform focused on fairness, clarity, and accessibility. A space where people wouldn't be judged by their jackets, shoes, or the tiredness on their faces. In the end, the bank investigation wasn't about catching someone doing something wrong. It was about revealing what needed to change. And it did, slowly but surely. Because sometimes the most powerful lessons are learned when you walk into a room as a stranger and walk out as someone determined to make the world a little fairer.